we hear from you, our listeners, quite a bit about wanting to grasp those huge historical moments, the ones that really changed everything.
Absolutely, those pivotal events.
And today, we're really diving into one of the biggest and, frankly, most devastating, World War I.
The Great War.
Yeah. Our goal here is to give you a solid, clear understanding. We'll go from that first shot in Sarajevo right through to the Treaty of Versailles afterwards.
And hopefully uncover some less obvious things, too. It's not just about dates and battles, is it? It's understanding how it happened.
Exactly. It's like, how did all these pre-existing conditions, these tensions, just suddenly explode?
Like wound up springs, yeah. We want to look at those forces, militarism, alliances, and so on, and see how they interacted. It created something totally unprecedented.
Okay, so let's paint the picture. Early 1900s Europe, you've got these big empires, Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia.
Mm-hmm. Big players.
And it wasn't exactly peaceful coexistence, was it?
Yeah.
More like powerful neighbors constantly sizing each other up.
Not at all. Very competitive. Everyone wanted more power, more land, more influence, constant friction.
And that's where those MAIN causes come in. Militarism, alliances.
Imperialism and nationalism, exactly. But the key thing is they weren't separate issues. They all fed into each other.
How so?
Well, think about it. Intense national pride nationalism often fuels a military buildup militarism.
Right.
And having a bigger military makes your alliances seem even more crucial for protection or maybe even for expansion imperialism. It's all connected.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of militarism, Germany. After it unified in 1871, its growth was pretty rapid, wasn't it?
Oh, incredibly rapid. Industrially, militarily, it really shot up.
That must have set off alarm bells, especially for Britain and France.
Absolutely. Britain relied on its naval dominance. Suddenly, here's Germany building a big navy.
A direct challenge.
And France, well, they had a history with Germany, and seeing this new powerhouse right next door, it was deeply worrying for them.
So you get this arms race starting?
Yeah, pretty much. A dangerous cycle of buildup, suspicion, more buildup. It just raised the temperature across the continent.
And then imperialism, the race for colonies, just poured fuel on the fire.
Added another layer of competition and potential conflict points, definitely. But the Balkans, that was a real flashpoint, a tinderbox, really.
Why the Balkans specifically?
Well, you had all these nationalist movements bubbling up, especially within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was this huge multi-ethnic empire, and many groups wanted their own nations.
Like Serbia.
Exactly. Serbia saw itself as the heart of a future South Slav state, Yugoslavia, essentially.
And Russia supported them.
Yes, Russia saw itself as the protector of the Slavic peoples. So Serbia's ambition directly clashed with Austria-Hungary's need to hold its empire together, a collision course.
So you got this incredibly tense atmosphere, all these underlying issues, and then bang, Sarajevo, June 28th, 1914.
The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne.
By Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist.
Part of a group called the Black Hand, yes. And that single event, horrific as it was, became the immediate trigger.
But it wasn't the cause in isolation, right? It was the match hitting the gasoline.
Precisely. The assassination lit the fuse, but the powder keg was already there because of militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism. It shows how one event can spiral totally out of control in a volatile system.
Austria-Hungary's reaction was strong, and they had German backing, the famous blank check.
They did.
Speaking to you from the cabinet room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany. You can imagine what a bitter blow it is to me that all my long struggle to win peace has failed. Yet I cannot believe that there is anything more or anything different that I could have done and that would have been more successful.
Germany essentially told Austria-Hungary, we've got your back, deal with Serbia. Now, the extent of that blank check is debated by historians, but
it emboldened them.
absolutely. Austria-Hungary issued this incredibly harsh ultimatum to Serbia.
Did Serbia accept any of it?
They actually accepted most of the terms, surprisingly. But there were a few points designed to be unacceptable, things that violated Serbian sovereignty.
So Austria-Hungary knew they'd likely reject it.
It seems likely, yes. And when Serbia couldn't accept every single point, Austria-Hungary declared war, July 28th, 1914.
And that's when the dominoes started falling. The alliance system kicked in,
Instantly. Russia, allied with Serbia, starts mobilizing its army.
which Germany saw as a threat.
Directly. So Germany declares war on Russia. Then, because France is allied with Russia, Germany declares war on France too.
And then they invade Belgium.
Right. Germany's war plan involved marching through neutral Belgium to attack France quickly.
But Britain had a treaty to protect Belgium.
Exactly. So Britain declares war on Germany. And just like that, within about a week, all the major European powers are at war.
It's incredible how fast it happened. And nobody thought it would last long, did they? Home by Christmas.
That was the common feeling, yes. A short, sharp, glorious war. How wrong they were.
Tragically wrong. Because instead, it bogged down.
Very quickly. By late 1914, especially on the Western Front, it became this brutal stalemate. Trenches stretching hundreds of miles from the North Sea down to Switzerland.
And trench warfare began. We hear about it, but what was it actually like?
It's hard to truly capture. Imagine elaborate networks of ditches, dugouts, barbed wire. But the conditions, horrific. Constant mud, especially in places like Flanders, rats everywhere, lice, disease like trench foot was rampant.
And the danger.
Constant danger, artillery shells, sniper fire, poison gas later on. And then there was no man's land between the trenches.
Just a wasteland.
A shell-scarred, corpse-strewn wasteland. Going over the top into no man's land was often suicidal.
And the big battles. Verdun, the Somme. The names themselves sound ominous now.
They were meat grinders. Verdun in 1916, France versus Germany. It lasted 10 months.
10 months.
10 brutal months. The French motto was, ils ne passeront pas, they shall not pass. And they didn't, but the cost.
Yeah.
Over 700,000 casualties on both sides. For almost no strategic gain, it was pure attrition.
Just trying to bleed the other side dry.
Essentially, yes. And the Somme, later that same year. That was the British attempt to break through, partly to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun.
The first day of the Somme.
July 1st, 1916. The single bloodiest day in British military history. Nearly 57,000 British casualties.
Just staggering.
The entire battle lasted months, over 1 million casualties in total. Again, for tiny gains of ground. It showed the futility, the horror of trench warfare.
And while we focus on the Western Front, this was a world war, right? It wasn't just Europe.
Absolutely not. Fighting raged in Africa, the Middle East, even the Pacific. Japan was allied with Britain and seized German colonies in Asia.
So the empires pulled their colonies into it.
Resources, manpower, everything got drawn in from across the globe. It truly was global.
This war also saw a terrifying leap in military technology, didn't it? It was the first truly industrial war.
That's a crucial point. It marked the arrival of modern warfare as we perhaps recognize it more today. Tanks, airplanes, submarines, chemical weapons.
The machine guns alone must have changed infantry tactics completely.
Dramatically. A couple of machine guns could wipe out waves of attacking soldiers, firing 600 rounds a minute. It made defense incredibly strong and contributed massively to the stalemate.
But artillery.
Became much more powerful, more accurate. Shells could obliterate entire sections of trench, entire battalions sometimes. The sheer destructive power was unprecedented.
And then poison gas.
Yes. Chlorine, phosgene, mustard gas. A truly horrific development.
What'd it do?
Caused blindness, terrible burns, respiratory failure, a slow, agonizing death. And the psychological impact, the constant fear of a gas attack was immense.
Even the skies became battlefields.
Yeah.
Airplanes weren't just for scouting anymore.
No, air combat dogfights emerged. You had these biplanes battling it out. Figures like the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen became famous, almost legendary.
A grim sort of fame.
Indeed. And below the sea, the U-boats. Germany's submarine campaign.
That caused a lot of controversy, especially the attacks on civilian ships.
Hugely controversial. Unrestricted submarine warfare aimed to starve Britain by sinking supply ships. But when they sank passenger liners like the Lusitania in 1915...
Killing over 1,000 people, including Americans.
128 Americans, yes. It outraged public opinion in the US and really pushed them towards eventually joining the war, although they stayed neutral for another couple of years.
This sounds like it wasn't just soldiers fighting soldiers anymore. The whole nation was involved.
That's the concept of total war. The entire society, the entire economy was mobilized for the war effort.
How did that affect civilians?
Rationing of food, fuel, materials. Conscription drafting huge numbers of men. Governments used heavy censorship and propaganda to maintain morale and support.
And women's roles changed.
Massively. With so many men away fighting, women moved into factories, farms, transport, nursing, jobs they'd never done before on that scale. It had a huge social impact.
So while the West was bogged down, what was happening on the Eastern Front with Russia?
The Eastern Front was very different. Much more fluid, more movement, vast distances, but incredibly brutal too. Russia suffered enormous losses against the Germans and Austro-Hungarian.
Their army wasn't as well equipped, perhaps.
Yeah. Less industrialized, yes. Huge manpower, but often lacking supplies, modern weapons, effective leadership compared to Germany. The casualties were just astronomical.
And this took its toll back home in Russia.
By 1917, absolutely. The strain was unbearable. Food shortages, massive inflation, political chaos, loss of faith in the Tsar.
Leading to revolution.
First, the February Revolution. In March 1917, the Tsar abdicates. A provisional government takes over, but the chaos continues.
And then the Bolsheviks saw their chance.
Led by Lenin, they promised peace, land, and bread, powerful messages to a war-weary, starving population.
So they seized power.
In the October Revolution, which was actually November by our calendar, they overthrew the provisional government, a complete game changer for Russia.
And their first move regarding the war.
Get out, at almost any cost. They signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in early 1918.
What did that involve?
Huge concessions. Russia gave up vast territories, Ukraine, Poland, the Baltic states, a massive chunk of its former empire. But for Lenin, peace was essential to consolidate Bolshevik power.
That must have been a huge boost for Germany, though, freeing up all those troops from the east.
It was. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers could now be transferred to the Western Front for a final push.
But just as Russia leaves, another giant enters, the United States.
The timing is critical, yes. The U.S. declared war on Germany in April 1917.
Why then? Was it just the U-boats?
That was a major factor, Germany resuming unrestricted submarine warfare. Also, the Zimmermann telegram, where Germany tried to get Mexico to attack the U.S., but President Wilson framed it more idealistically.
Make the world safe for democracy.
That was the famous phrase. So America starts mobilizing.
And the impact? Was it immediate?
It took time to train and transport troops, but by 1918, the American Expeditionary Forces, the AEF under General Pershing, were arriving in large numbers. Over 2 million eventually served in France.
So that must have tilted the balance.
Significantly. Fresh troops, vast industrial resources, a huge morale boost for the Allies who were exhausted after years of war, and a corresponding blow to German morale.
So Germany launches its final big offensive in 1918. Using those troops from the east.
Yes, the spring offensive, they made some initial breakthroughs, pushed the Allies back quite significantly in places. It looked dangerous for a while.
But they couldn't sustain it.
No. They outran their supply lines, their troops were exhausted, they took heavy casualties, and the Allied defense, bolstered by the Americans, stiffened.
And then the Allies counterattacked.
The 100 Days Offensive, starting in August 1918. A sustained Allied push, using coordinated attacks with tanks, aircraft, infantry. They started rolling the German lines back.
And Germany's allies started to fall apart.
Yes. Bulgaria surrendered, then the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary disintegrated amid internal revolts and military defeat. Germany was left isolated.
And facing defeat itself.
Facing collapse at home, too. Mutinies, revolution brewing. The military command finally told the government the war was lost.
Leading to the armistice, November 11th, 1918.
The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The guns finally fell silent on the Western Front.
The end of the fighting, but the cost.
Unbelievable. Over 16 million dead soldiers and civilians. Another 21 million wounded. Entire generations scarred.
An empire's gone.
The Russian, the Ottoman, the Austro-Hungarian, the German empires all collapsed. The map of Europe and the Middle East was completely redrawn.
And the physical destruction.
Huge swaths of Europe were devastated. Cities ruined, economies shattered, societies fractured. Just immense devastation.
So peace finally arrives. But then came the challenge of making peace. Versailles, 1919.
The victors gathered at the Palace of Versailles outside Paris. Britain, France, the US, Italy were the main players.
And they imposed terms on Germany, harsh terms.
Very harsh. Germany lost territory, its military was severely restricted, it had to pay enormous financial reparations.
And the war guilt clause.
Article 231, Germany was forced to accept sole responsibility for causing the war.
That must have caused huge resentment in Germany.
Deep, lasting resentment, a sense of national humiliation. Many historians argue it poisoned the atmosphere of the Weimar Republic and helped create fertile ground for extremism later on.
It wasn't just about the money, it was the blame itself.
Exactly. The humiliation was key. It became a rallying cry for those who wanted to overturn the treaty. A tough lesson in how not to end a war, perhaps.
Was there any attempt at preventing future wars?
Yes. President Wilson's big idea? The League of Nations. An international body to resolve disputes peacefully, provide collective security.
But it wasn't very effective, was it?
It had fundamental weaknesses. Crucially, the United States itself never joined, which crippled it from the start. It also lacked any real enforcement power. Noble idea, but ultimately unable to prevent aggression in the 1930s.
So looking back, this war to end all wars, it really wasn't.
Far from it. And in many ways, it just set the stage for World War II 20 years later. It ended the old world order, unleashed new forces like communism and fascism, redrew maps, changed societies. Its impact was transformative and deeply tragic.
It really reshaped everything. It's ironic, isn't it? Called the war to end all wars, but it feels more like just the beginning of a century of conflict.
That's a very powerful way to put it. Its legacy is still with us today, in the borders, the politics, the memories. Understanding WWI is crucial to understanding so much of what came after.
Definitely food for thought. Thank you for walking us through that complex history. It really highlights the human cost and how fragile peace can be.
Indeed, it's a constant reminder.